Hi, I'm Rod Kurtz. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the stories we're following today. As the Canada-U.S. trade war heats up, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says it's time to inflict some pain on the U.S. president. And while U.S. tariffs will hurt businesses, economics prof Trevor Tombe says the long-term consequence will be uncertainty. And we take you to the second annual Robot Games in China.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump is lashing out with more threats of hefty tariffs, and his latest targets include Canada's auto sector. Trump says he'll hike tariffs on all vehicles, auto parts, and steel from Canada to 50% starting January 1st of 2027. He made the pronouncement this morning on his social media website. Trump's post accuses Canada of being among the worst nations in the world to deal with, but he presents no evidence for that claim. Speaking in Quebec on Monday, Prime Minister Mark Carney offered this response to Trump's latest move.
It's not a surprise for us that the U.S. would take some form of reprisal to our response to their unjustified tariff, which was on top of other unjustified tariffs. That's not a surprise. And the president is doing what we not just suspected, but we had confirmed through the terms that they were offering. Instead of a quick change to the terms in the automobile industry, they were putting on the table terms that gradually would have that impact, and we wouldn't accept that. So it's very revealing that this is where they go.
In Quebec today, the Prime Minister unveiled more than $11 billion in funding for Quebec's shipbuilding industry to build 6 new icebreakers. The new vessels will replace the Coast Guard's aging heavy and medium icebreakers. Carney calls it the largest shipbuilding contract in the province's history. Meantime, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says everything needs to be on the table as Trump continues to ratchet up the trade war. Canada, he says, should be ready to cut off electricity and critical minerals to the U.S. if the trade war worsens. And although he didn't mention oil, Ford did say he'll be talking to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
I cannot speak for other premiers, but a couple premiers have a lot of power to protect Canada, massive power. And I can't speak for them, but we need everyone to be on Team Canada and throw everything in the kitchen sink at them, no matter if it's electricity, if it's fuel, again, if it's potash or uranium. We need to have everything on the table, but we need a buy-in from coast to coast to coast. And we'll work together with the other premiers. I know the Prime Minister will, but we could put massive, massive pain on the U.S. President Trump underestimates us, and that's the biggest mistake, underestimating your opponent.
After Trump posted on social media that Ford is just a Carney lackey who needs to get in line, Ford said Trump can kiss a certain part of his body and joked that there's a lot of area to choose from. Well, this re-escalation of Canada's trade war with the United States could have implications for economic growth and consumer prices. University of Calgary economics professor Trevor Tombe says renewed uncertainty could be the biggest consequence of this.
The biggest impact is in machinery and electronics. About 6 billion US of exports are affected by these, plastic and rubber and chemical manufacturing. But interestingly, furniture and textiles are the sectors that will see the largest proportional hit, with nearly half of exports of those two sectors now affected by the tariffs. 50% on 5% of our exports means the effective tariff rate for Canada's exports overall are going to rise by about 2.5 percentage points. But that increase is twice as large in Ontario and Quebec, and even larger than that for British Columbia. So the tariffs that we levy in retaliation, that will raise consumer prices. A lot depends on what the tariffs are levied on, and we don't yet no, but something on the order of perhaps a full percentage point increase in average consumer prices might be on the table, given the size of the retaliation that's being telegraphed at this point. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the bank is going to respond with higher interest rates, because this is a one-time change connected to a policy choice. The pace of economic growth has slowed largely for Canada because of uncertainty rather than tariffs. And right now, that uncertainty has just ratcheted right back up again, with the president talking about new tariffs. I believe what he tweeted out this morning isn't really set to take effect on their end until January 1st. And so there's a lot of uncertainty that'll exist between now and then, even before the tariffs themselves kick in. So that for Canada is perhaps a much larger economic hit than just these tariffs.
And meantime, the opposition Conservatives want the Carney Liberals to release the full details of the proposed Canada-US trade deal that was on the table before negotiations collapsed on Friday. Calgary Conservative MP Chevaloy Majumner says it's the party's shadow minister, or rather he is the party's shadow minister for Canada-US relations. And he said in a letter to Canada-US Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc on Sunday, the Conservatives aren't asking for negotiating secrets. They're seeking information that Ottawa and Washington already know. Majumner says this information will allow Canadians to debate and discuss the way forward as a country. Politicians, dignitaries, Indigenous chiefs, and elders gathered in Saskatchewan on Sunday to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 6. The treaty was first signed on August 23, 1876, and covers most of today's central Saskatchewan and Alberta. The agreement was the sixth of 11 treaties signed after Confederation by representatives of the Crown and First Nations chiefs. Those who spoke at Sunday's gathering are hopeful the next 150 years will be better than the past.
As we commemorate 150 years, we also have to be truthful. Many treaty promises have yet to be fulfilled and implemented. Our people continue to face serious inequities in healthcare, housing, education, and infrastructure. Too often, our nations are still fighting for what our ancestors believed treaty had already protected. So these 4 days cannot be only about looking back. They must also be about looking forward.
Canada did not always live up to those promises. First Nations were denied land. First Nations were denied economic opportunities and basic justice. Treaty commitments went unfulfilled, and those failures had massive consequences that lasted for generations.
Your ancestors were too often denied the justice, dignity, and respect to which they were entitled. Colonization gave rise to some of the darkest chapters in Canadian history. We live in uncertain and very challenging times. More than ever, our collective well-being depends on the trust that we place on one another. Today marks our commitment to keeping that trust alive.
Ukrainians today are marking August 24th as the nation's Independence Day, even as the country continues the fifth year of a war with Russia that's forced millions to flee the country. Locally, a celebration was held downtown on Saturday by the recently established Rushnik Ukrainian Association. The group's founder, Medina Kononenko, says the organization has helped numerous Ukrainian newcomers get settled in Canada. And she says independence has great significance where they come from.
We're trying to do our best, and I think people remember where they're from, and we're trying to, like, on Saturday, we've had our Ukrainian Independence Day celebration here in Lethbridge. We're fortunate to have something like that and bring the community together. Independence is to be able to speak up for yourself, which we're doing right now, and to be able to keep our traditions alive and for our kids and for our future generations. We're very happy to be here in Canada, and we will try to do our best to support and help with everything we can with the Ukrainian community, as well as just to be a part of Canada. It's an honor for us.
Ukraine declared independence from the Soviet Union back on August 24, 1991. About 300,000 Ukrainians have also come to Canada ever since Russia began their invasion of the country back in February of 2022. Lethbridge police were on the streets this past weekend as part of a summer traffic crackdown. LPS issued 67 tickets and removed one impaired driver from the streets. They also apprehended one suspended driver and another operating a vehicle without insurance. That resulted in the vehicle being towed. LPS says during this project, the Traffic Response Unit deliberately targeted drivers responsible for speeding, stunting, racing, excessive noise, equipment violations, and other aggressive and illegal driving. And LPS reminds drivers that officers are taking a zero-tolerance approach. The public's encouraged to continue reporting violations and high-risk driving behavior by calling LPS on its non-emergency line. A woman and her boyfriend walked away from a frightening ride malfunction at Lethbridge's Whoop Up Days after a tilt-a-whirl car they were riding became uncoupled and tipped backward. As BCN's Naveen Day tells us, the woman is grateful it happened to her and not a small child.
They could have broke her ribs, decapitated. Like, what if I'm like, am I being dramatic?
I'm standing in the approximate location that the footprint of the popular tilt-a-whirl ride occupied during Whoop Up Days. And on Friday night, a couple walked away without serious injuries after their car uncoupled from the ride's platform and tipped over backwards. Natanis Watney was out with her boyfriend on their first date in about 3 years. She said that when the ride malfunctioned, she almost flew right out of the car. While still in shock from the incident, Natanis said that she was grateful that it happened to her, not a small child, and no one got hurt.
It just happened so fast. Like, me and my partner were just like, and then I heard that loud noise, and then like it just like the world stopped for a second because I'm like, oh, what the heck happened? My partner helped me up because I was like in shock, and we crawled out because that bar, it's like a metal bar that holds us together, and it like malfunctioned, and then like the whole base came off. Even like that umbrella came off too. What if it would have fell on us or something? Because that's a heavy bar, and then like we just went back, and then that bar went flying. And I'm kind of glad that it happened the way it did because no one got hurt.
Following the incident, a manager with West Coast Amusements spoke with Natanis. She says the conversation was positive as the person she identified only as Rob explained how they were going to follow up on this incident.
And he was just explaining that new policy has to be installed. The wording specifically, what type of clips that needs to be added. And because they were using the wrong kind of clips the whole time. And then so that the wording, it has to change. And he said that he's working on it.
Bridge City News reached out to West Coast Amusements for comment on the incident and to learn more about their safety standards. Now, they didn't return our messages in time for broadcast, but I was able to obtain the following information from their website. It says, we implement a comprehensive care and maintenance routine that includes daily equipment inspections. Every employee undergoes training through our department-specific employee training program, ensuring they are equipped to maintain our high safety standards. Natanis adds she holds no animosity towards West Coast Amusements or Whoop Up Days and will continue attending festivals and going on rides. When she took to social media to share her experience and advocate for the safety of families on amusement rides, she didn't expect to face backlash or bullying to the point where she had to delete her post.
I didn't expect to like get bullied, to delete my post, or like a lot of people were like saying, this is the type of like person that ruins Whoop Up Days. And I'm just like, no, that my intention is to like change the safety regulations and the standards so we could all continue to enjoy Whoop Up Days as a family, like everybody.
The tilt-a-whirl has been a favorite of ride-goers for generations. It will celebrate its 100th anniversary of existence on September the 3rd. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Well, if you're heading to the city's waste and recycling center in the coming days, be prepared for some delays. Construction will began over the weekend at the main intersection within the WRC, as well as the East Road and the public and commercial drop-off zones. The aim is to improve traffic flow throughout the site. The work will include excavation, base preparation, and paving. The project's expected to take 5 weeks, weather permitting. With students heading back to the classroom next week, many families are checking off their school supply lists. Well, the Better Business Bureau is offering tips to not only help students and their families avoid scams and common shopping pitfalls, but also to shop smarter and save money.
Let's kind of develop a shopping list, because you might walk into a store without a list and start buying a lot of extra things that you don't need. When we're talking about laptop computers, that kind of thing, it's good to know what the technical requirements are, the specifications. If you go online, do not click on some ad that pops up in your social media offering a big discount without knowing who you're dealing with, because that can take you to some sites that may be dubious, might not be good, and you might get scammed. The other thing I would mention is it's good to use a credit card when you're making purchases, because if there is a problem later, you can dispute that transaction with your credit card. When you are online shopping, look for the HTTPS protocol. It goes a long way to ensuring that you're actually dealing with a reputable online retailer.
Other tips include comparing prices, taking advantage of sales and discounts, and checking return policies. Over the weekend in China, more than 2,000 humanoid robots competed for gold at China's second annual Robot Games.
第一说要跟人类比之类的，物有所长嘛。它呢，主要是现在应用于教育领域，比如说幼教啊之类的，在幼儿园当助教啊，得到小朋友喜欢，更能够让小朋友去接受。这是一个我们未来一个方向，进入消费场所进入消费场景的一个方向。
Not sure if I should be amazed or a little frightened. I think I'm a little bit of both.
Cross-border trade relations have hit a dramatic breaking point as last-minute negotiations between Canada and the U.S. collapsed, triggering a high-stakes tariff battle. Following the breakdown in Washington, President Donald Trump enacted 50% duty on $28 billion worth of Canadian goods under Section 338. Prime Minister Mark Carney recalled Canadian negotiators back to Ottawa, calling Washington's last-minute demands on truck production, foreign trade policy, and cultural protections totally unacceptable. While bulk agricultural commodities like grain and live cattle remain exempt, the Section 338 tariffs directly hit secondary processed ag products, dairy, plant-based proteins, and Canadian-made farm machinery. Carney has pledged a dollar-for-dollar counterstrike taking effect September 8th, targeting U.S. dairy, steel, and agricultural equipment. With farm groups on both sides calling for a return to the table, Canadian farmers now face escalating input costs and supply chain uncertainty, heading right into harvest. For Bridge City News, I'm Sean Haney with RealAgriculture.com.
WestJet flight attendants have ratified their new contract with the airline. The flight attendants are members of QP Local 8125 and voted 90.2% in favor of this new deal. It was reached after a 24-hour strike on August 3rd. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says the new deal includes a more than 18% wage hike over 3 years, as well as new compensation for work done on the ground. The contract would give the workers a 13% wage increase this October, followed by 2.75% in January, and then another 2.5% raise at the start of 2028. This 3-year agreement expires at the end of December 2028. Unifor and General Motors reached a tentative agreement for 4,600 auto workers over the weekend. Talks between the union and the automakers started earlier this month after Unifor reached an agreement with Ford. With more on the contract deal, here's Lisa Laporte with the Canadian Press.
Unifor National President Lana Payne says the agreements deliver strong increases in wages and benefits for workers at GM facilities in Ontario. They include the Oshawa Assembly Plant, the CAMI facility in Ingersoll, as well as operations in St. Catharines and Woodstock. Talks between Unifor and GM Canada started earlier this month after the union reached an agreement with Ford that included 3% annual pay increases and a renewal of a no-closure agreement. Unifor's top bargainer with GM says the tentative deals are in line with the pattern set by the Ford agreement. The GM labor contracts must still be ratified by union members.
And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 93 points on the day to 36,714. The Dow was up 140 points to 53,417. The S&P 500 was down 21 to 7652. And the Nasdaq was down 200 points to finish at 25,980. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 208 to 84.98 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to 2.75 US. Gold was up 44.65 to 46.52 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to 68.95 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.60 per bushel. Barley is at $6.18. Canola is at $17.61. And corn is at $7.95 per bushel. Live cattle were down $2.97 to $2.20.07. Feeder cattle were down $1.17 to $3.33.57. Lean hogs October contract was up 25 cents to 81.12. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours at 72.20 US.
Recapping one of today's top stories, U.S. President Donald Trump not happy with Canada retaliating after trade talks broke down last Friday. Today on social media, Trump lashed out, threatening to hike tariffs on all vehicles, auto parts, and steel from Canada to 50% on January 1st, 2027. He later posted a threat to Canadian energy that flows through the U.S. Both Ontario Premier Doug Ford and New Brunswick's Susan Holt say it's time to hit the U.S. where it hurts. Coming up on Bridge City News, is federal legislation slowly whittling away at our freedoms? Randy Crossan with the group Freedoms Advocate says yes. In fact, the group has compiled a list of 12 new bills it says are chipping away at your freedoms. Randy will join us to talk about them in just a few moments. And when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email. Send it to info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or our YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our content as well as our poll questions.